Okay, some learning announcements. Year of Learning, sponsored by Julie and Boris Kagan, to marry the year of Julie's father, Yisrael Ben Motto. A month of learning, sponsored by Annette and Jerry Cranston, to commemorate the year sites of Annette's parents, Yenya and Joseph Zimmer, Greene and Leah Barretts, and Yosef and Sarah Pesach. And a week of learning, sponsored by the Rabbi family, their daughter and sister, Ilona, whose 5th year site is on the 24th of Thomas, July 9th. Only Shana Shav and Aliyah. Don't forget, next week on Wednesday is Rosh Chodesh Lunch and Learn. You got the email yesterday. If you'd like to join us, please make a reservation.
Okay, good morning, everybody. The question that I'd like to discuss today is something that's come up many times during Jewish history. We know that there are different occasions when Jewish men have been called to the army. It's going on today, unfortunately, in Israel. And among those who are called to duty, sometimes you have people who are Kohanim. And in the course of battle, sometimes you're required to kill somebody to achieve a military objective, to save your own life. So the question comes up, if you have a Kohen who's in the army who kills somebody, and we're not talking about murder, we're talking about killing somebody in the act of defending your country or defending yourself or what have you, can that person, when he returns to civilian life, participate in Birchas Kohanim? Can a Kohen who kills somebody duchen? And it's a real problem. When Leviim were exempt because they were working in the Mishkan or Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash, because of their elevated status and the work that they didn't participate in battles unless it was a Milchemes mitzvah. So that sort of obviated that problem. But throughout history, you've had this problem come up time and time again, especially today. And in the 20th century, it came up many, many times with World War I, World War II. And it's a practical question. So, yeah.
Is it the same thing with a Kohen who's a doctor?
We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
This might be really a dumb question, but the Kohen in the military is not killing for fun.
Correct.
And I would think that there's got to be some giant okay heter that, he's doing what he needs to do to defend his country, to defend his own life, his colleagues' lives and everything. And it's as if he has two lives. One is the military and one is the civilian. And somebody that puts his life on the line, he happens to be a Kohen, but I don't think that should take away any kahuna points.
Well, that's the question. Does it take away kahuna points? Because taking a life is a very serious issue. And for a Kohen who is involved in serving as a vehicle for Hashem's bracha, once you've taken a life, it changes a person, anybody.
Right.
And which is why in the question came up that we'll get to later, can a Kohen claim a military exemption? Because based on a Gemara, let's go back to the Gemara for a moment. Gemara in Bracha says, Om Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Kohen shehora gesa nefesh, any Kohen who takes a life, lo yisa eskapov, he may not duchen. Shenemar yedechem damim maleyu. Since Hashem's bracha is conveyed through the fingertips of the Kohanim, so how could those fingertips, which convey Hashem's bracha, through the same hands that may have killed somebody? Now, by the way, I want to make a very important distinction between murder and killing. If you murder somebody, then all bets are off the table. You no matter who you can't duch. That's it. If you murder somebody, you cannot duch it. Period. Sof pasuk. Killing somebody to save a life in war, to protect your property, that's a different story. And in the Ten Commandments, it doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It's an erroneous translation. Thou shalt not murder. Big difference. Now, the status of the Kohen, and again, no human being is perfect. A mensch is not a mensch, but Kohanim are on an elevated plane, at least theoretically. And the Shulchan Aruch, therefore, based on this Gemara, Paskins, Kohen shahora ges hanefesh. If a Kohen happens to kill somebody, afilu b'shogeg, even accidentally, lo yisa eskapov. He may not duchen. Ve'afilu osa tshuva. And even if he does tshuva about killing somebody accidentally or what have you, Shulchan Aruch. Now, that's Shulchan Aruch. He was Shulchan Aruch was known to be a Kabbalist, to be a mystical input there, whatever. That's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. The Ramah, who paskins for us, says v'yesh omrim dim asa tshuva nosei kapov. If a person happened to have killed somebody for whatever reason and does tshuva, yesh lahakel al balei tshuva shelo ninol dalech b'fneihem v'haki nohuk. This is our practice, that if a Kohen happens to have killed somebody, whether it's accidentally, whether it was to defend himself, whether it was a war, whatever the case may have been, and he regrets doing it, or even if it was done accidentally, he may duch it. Okay. But the clear implication is that in the Gemara Yerushalmi says that adds another interesting fact. When we call Kohanim to duchen, we call them up in the plural, Kohanim, and they all go up to the bima. So that, and the Yerushalmi points out, the reason you say it in the plural, even if there's only one Kohen in the shul, you call them out as a group, because you shouldn't point, oh, this one's a no good, this one didn't daven mincha yesterday, this one's an adulterer, this one, whatever you don't point out to the Kohen and say, this guy. Look, again, people are human. People have, but you don't point out the shortcomings of other individuals. That's why they called up in the plural. Okay. And then there's a machlokas rishonim about people who have killed b'shogeg. Again, we're distinguishing between a murder versus killing. Murder is, everybody agrees, a Kohen can't duchen if he's a murderer. Okay, let's see. Now, one of the reasons that are given, some Mefarshim point out that the avoda in the mikdash is performed with one's hands, and therefore, ain't kateger nasa saneger. The prosecuting attorney can't become the defense attorney. So if you use your hands to kill somebody, how can you do avoda in the Beis HaMikdash? That's one of the interpretations. The Pri Megadim talks about what if a Kohen is already called up to duchen, and he might be somebody who killed somebody. Again, there's a question of, you don't ask him to step down. It's a whole discussion about, but these are a whole discussion that gets into the old question of tshuva and how important tshuva is for a Kohen. Now, let's extend that to other categories. Beyond war, what about a doctor? What about a mohel? Very often, a mohel does a bris, and for whatever reason, the child dies. It happens. It happens. And that mohel is a Kohen. And the child dies. A doctor, a surgeon. Most surgeons, unfortunately, they lose a few people along the way. It happens. You try, your operation successful, the patient died. In other words, you try as hard as you can to save lives. But as I say, I'm like a trophy. It happens. It happens that sometimes as hard as a doctor might try to save someone's life, a person can die on the operating table, a person can die from complications later on. Can that, and that doctor's a Kohen, can he still do it? After all, his patient died. Yeah.
But in spite of that, since it's about tumor, in other words, he may be in the hospital or someone
That's a whole, so
can still do it.
this is why Rav Schechter has made it very clear to his students, if you are a Kohen, you may not go to medical school. Kohanim should not become doctors. For that very reason, you're always surrounded by tumor, perhaps in a hospital, and also the possibility that not all patients are going to survive. So he poskined that Kohanim should not become doctors. That's his psak. I don't know about anybody else who poskins that way. That's his psak. Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying before, what was the status of Pinchas at the time that he killed? Right, he was not a Kohen yet.
Right.
Right. So is it kind of like
Not a Kohen
he
Gadol.
got a bad? He wasn't. I don't think he was
Well,
a
I don't-
Kohen
Not a
either.
Kohen, not a Kohen Gadol.
Why? How was
He
he?
came from the.
Not only did he get it passed, but he got a bracha.
Right.
But again, but Mendy, what he was doing was not murder.
Yeah,
Same thing.
but we're saying the same thing
Yeah.
here.
Say, it's an interesting thing. Very often, not only doctors, but barbers used to perform bloodletting with leeches as a cure. And sometimes the patient would die. You know, and this guy happens to be a barber, is a Kohen, you know, again, he could still do it. Many years ago, I was, wow, 1969. I was giving a class to a bunch of very high-powered attorneys in New York City, based on a Gemara Makos. And Gemara Makos talks about Hahoreg B'Shogeg, accidental murder, or accidental killing. And there's a whole sugi in the Gemara, several sugis about that. But what I found fascinating, if you look up, and this blew my mind, in Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat, when it talks about damages, Shulchan Aruch paskins, if a doctor loses a patient, the patient dies, so you're exempt from punishment. You did the best you could, but Aval Chayav Min HaShamayim. That blew my mind. You're exempt, but L'Asad Lavo in Shamayim, you're going to pay something, whatever that means, based on a Tosefta. But it's a wild halacha. Again, we can't hold doctors responsible if they lose a patient. It happens. You try the best you can, but a doctor only has so much to offer. But if you do lose a patient, you know what? L'Asad Lavo, you'll be called to account. Fascinating. Try to wrap your mind around that. It's a fascinating concept. Let's go a little bit further. What if you are a Kohen? Is there a difference if you kill a Jew or a non-Jew? So this is a machlokas among some Mefarshim, but clearly it shouldn't make a difference. And more common occurrence, you are a Kohen and you're involved in an auto accident and somebody dies. If you accidentally killed somebody in a car accident and you're a Kohen, so can you do it? And the answer is yes, if you do tshuva. Obviously, it's an accident.
Wally,
Yes.
if a person dies because of a doctor, is it because of the doctor or is it because that's when Hashem has taken him?
Well, that's why you're ultimately, obviously, life and death are in Hashem's hands. But men are the vehicles. In many cases, a doctor is the intermediary, shall I say. And a doctor is only human. A doctor, a mensch is not a mensch. A person can do the best that he can, but ultimately it's in Hashem's hands.
So
So a
why should the
person,
doctor be punished?
so a person can't be held fully responsible, but again, chayiv min hashamayim, ultimately you are responsible, and that's why it's an awesome responsibility to have somebody's life in your hands. Now, very often the doctor leaves certain choices up to a patient. There's a procedure that I could do, but it's very, very dangerous. Do you want me to do it or you don't want me to do it? There's a medication that's experimental. It may work, it may not work. Do you want to try it? So there's like a shared responsibility here as to the patient, as well. If a patient is comatose, the patient's family makes their decisions. A doctor ultimately will do what's in the best in concept, and 99% of the case this is true. A doctor will do what's in the best interest of his patient. Usually that's what happens. But ultimately it's in Hashem's hands. Yeah.
Okay, so Honey and I have
On the same page.
have an issue,
Go for it.
and that is, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but people, Rabbanim through the centuries, through today, you got to make up your mind.
Mhm.
Do things happen at the bottom line, at the end of the tunnel, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu decides it, or because man? Because as we think here, if Hashem is the one that ultimately decides, mi yachya, mi yamut, then in some way, he is causing the doctor to be successful or not successful with this patient's life. So why in the world should the doctor, unless there's like humongous negligence or something, why should he be punished, even in the Olam Haba, for something the Kadosh Baruch Hu decided?
Good.
It's like double dipping.
But then no one would.
I'm letting
Okay,
you
so,
do this.
good-
You're doing this.
Good question. So ultimately, so it's a great question. You aren't the first person to ask it. Ultimately, Achaim v'amoves, it's all up to Hashem, ultimately. However, the Torah tells us, v'rapo yirapeh, we should do the best that we can to help a person as much as possible. Ultimately, it's up to Hashem, but we're not Christian scientists. We can't say, since it's ultimately God's choice, so we'll let that person suffer, and what happens, happens. We don't believe in suffering. We try to alleviate pain, to alleviate suffering. It's a big mitzvah to do that. Rapo Yirapeh, within the guidelines that the Torah gives us to try to help an individual as much as possible, and maybe in our helping that person, that is Ritzon Hashem. And ultimately, we don't know if that person's destiny is to live or to die. We hope it'll be to live, and we do the best that we can, but we understand that we are agents of Hashem in that regard. We are doing what Hashem wants us to do. If ultimately it's not going to work out, that's not our fault.
But you just said that the Kadosh Baruch Hu will punish him if the doctor.
All I said was that the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is that chayav min hashamayim simply means you'll be called to account. What that means, I don't know. You're exempt. The Beis Din is not going to punish you if a patient dies on the operating table. But Hashem has some serious questions. You're going to be called to in front of Hashem, and you can say, "No." Now, maybe that means he's going to ask you, "Did you do all you could do?" It doesn't mean you'll be punished. But chayav min hashamayim, you are obligated to answer for your actions to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No one's going to try you in court if the patient dies. You did the best that you could.
So you're accountable,
But you're
not necessarily.
You're accountable, whatever that might mean. Olam haba.
Okay, that's a big difference.
There's another fascinating question that the Gemara raises. It's a great question. I don't get the exact language here. Fascinating question. We know Gemara in Bava Metzia. Kol hamalbim penei chaveiro barabim keilu shofech damim. If you embarrass somebody publicly, it's as if you killed him, because the person's color drains from his face, whatever. So it's a fascinating question. If you embarrass somebody publicly, it's as if you killed him. If you're a Kohen and you embarrass somebody publicly, can you duchen? So there too, again, there are poskim, contemporary poskim, Rav Nosson Gestetner, Rav Wosner, and they say that a Kohen who embarrasses somebody in public should not duchen. They come out with that psak. You should not. Again, we know of Kohanim. No human being is perfect. But again, when you call up a Kohen, you call up in plural, because we know there are certain Kohanim that may not have the best midos. But it's not the Kohanim that are blessing you. That's a misconception. The Kohanim simply are vehicles. When they raise their hands, they're based on Mikdash. The Shekhinah is in the fingertips. That's why you cover your hands with a towel so you don't look at them. The Kohanim are not blessing you. They are the vehicles for Hashem's bracha to you. And if a Kohen is not particularly a nice guy, and again, as long as he didn't murder somebody, which one of us is perfect? We all have our shortcomings, and we should not judge other people. So again, bottom line, unless you are a murderer, that's the only invalidating quality for a Kohen. Other than that, any Kohen can go up to duchen. In the 20th century, there was a big machlokus before World War I. Rabbi Hertz, the famous Hertz Chumash, was the chief rabbi of England, and he asked Rav Kook in Israel, who was the, first chief rabbi and pre-state Israel, regarding Kohanim serving in the military, World War I. Because very often, Kohanim would ask for a military exemption because it is halacha. They want to be involved in murder and killing people in battle. So, again, can a Kohen claim a military exemption not to serve in the army? And the Rav Kook says that even though certain isurim are nidche, are put off for pikuach nefesh, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't ask for accommodations. And if the needs of the country can be taken care of without Kohanim serving, then they could, in fact, not claim an exemption, and Kohanim should not serve in the army, if at all possible. If they're going to be forced to do something that might involve killing another soldier. That was Rav Kook's psak. Rav Hertz did not accept Rav Kook's psak. And he informed the government of Great Britain that Kohanim can't claim to be conscientious objectors and on religious grounds. Because he was defending his country, it wasn't murder, it was a legitimate thing. And so first of all, it takes tremendous courage for the chief rabbi of Great Britain to go against the psak of Rav Kook. I mean, that's a major, again, Rav Hertz was no shrinking violet. I mean, he was also a Talmud Chacham. However, the Bezdin in Great Britain, the Leeds Bezdin, said, Rav Hertz, you're wrong, and Kohanim should be issued military exemptions. And it was a whole big machlokus prior to World War I. But the bottom line is it b'di'evet or l'chatchila? If there's a choice to avoid Kohanim violating their kahuna, then they should take that option. So if Great Britain would have allowed them to take a conscientious objector decision, they should be allowed to be exempt from serving in the military unless it was absolutely necessary. But Rav Hertz felt, no, it was important. And again, a big machlok, because I have the psak in the Bezdin of Leeds, who says that they should follow. But clearly, these questions are universal questions. They still exist today. As far as I know, now the Israeli army does grant exemptions on certain grounds. If you had family members that were killed in action, you are exempt from serving. There are other exemptions in the Israeli army.
There are also other need to go with the infantry.
Yeah.
There's all these other units that won't get you to a battle.
Well, look, if you're involved in intelligence gathering or some other type of thing, office work or chaplaincy or medical type, but even medical is problematic. But again, to say I don't want to serve in the army because I'm a Kohen, I don't think that would qualify for an exemption. It might. There may be assigned another duty, communications or code breaking, whatever. But in general, that exemption doesn't hold true today. I won't get involved in the whole issue of the Haredim not serving. That's a whole separate parsha altogether. But today, conscientious objectors, because they're Kohanim, I don't think that would be accepted, certainly not during wartime. During peacetime, maybe, but certainly not during wartime. But these halachos are very, very much contemporary, and the discussion goes on. Hopefully, there won't be any more need to have these discussions if they can work something out in terms of not serving in the military altogether. And unfortunately, there are too many young religious men serving in the army that lose their lives in defense of the country. Yes.
I've seen this. A client goes up to Dublin wearing a gun.
Yeah, going.
Oh, sure.
Cohen goes up Dublin wearing a gun. Interesting. All right. I remember. Yeah. I remember. I spent Shabbos in where was it? In Gush. Yeshiva in Gush once. And the guy standing next to me davening, tallis over his head, the rifle over his shoulder. I mean, I took a double take. There was, and there was a guy up on a roof, on guard duty, wearing his gun, and a stender and a Gemara in front of him. I don't know how much of a guard he was while learning Gemara, but you have people, it's a fact of life. The idea of American teenagers walking around carrying guns and rifles in America is bizarre. You go crazy. In Israel, teenagers, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds walking around wearing guns, it's it's natural, it's accepted, part of life. Hopefully, Mehera v'Yameinu, Mashiach will come, and we won't have to lo yisa goy al goy cherev v'lo yubudu od bilchama. These questions will be theoretical.
Wally,
Yes, Nathan.
does a person become tummy if he eats trees?
The person becomes tamei, what?
If he eats trees,
Yes.
he does. So a Kohen who eats trees accidentally, he should not do it if he knows.
Well, again, it's not up to us to judge anybody else. The only exclusion for a Kohen not to duchen is if he is a murderer. Other than that, any Kohen can duchen, whether he's Machal Shabbos, whether he eats treif, because he himself is not blessing the people, he's only a vehicle for them. So, again, that's the halacha.
He's married to a blue job.
Yeah, there are all types of psulim from kahuna, but not necessarily psul for Birchas Kohanim. And again, this is a difficult. I remember in the early years of Shomrei Torah, when we were struggling to get minyanim together, and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they gave kibbudim to people that were openly B'chalei Shabbos. Guys are wearing shoes on Yom Kippur, they got aliyahs.
Their kids today are from.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had a question.
I was just curious not with the military, but I've been on airplanes from Israel to America and the other way, where there is a sick individual where there are a couple of rows and there's a nurse and it's cordoned off with a thing. What happens if a Kohen is on a flight and he made sure there was no casket on that flight and someone dies on the plane?
What can you do?
I'll go you one step better. I will go you one step better. What about airplanes that fly over cemeteries?
About the parkway that goes right to.
Yeah, I have seen pictures of very religious Jews on a plane wrapping themselves in plastic. I mean,
That's Mugzam.
I'm telling you, it may be Mugzam, but that's what some people would do, because you on the approach to Kennedy Airport, you're flying over a number of cemeteries. And
And the plastics.
and then there's a plane is with Ohel and all kinds of other, and it goes up. It's all kinds of, look, yeah, there are all kinds of people in this world, and there are people who interpret halacha a certain way. Is it normative? Perhaps not, but they want to preserve a certain amount of kedusha for themselves. Does it look bizarre? Does it look strange to us? That's us. But just because we wouldn't do it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. For them, it's the right thing to do. So the beautiful thing about halacha is that in most cases, there are a variety of options that are all valid. Some might be less reasonable than others, but that's the beauty of halacha, that you have different interpretations. Ultimately, b'mheira v'yameinu, we'll find out what the real psak might be. Okay, have a great day out there, and Yilmudu od milchama.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Okay, be well, everybody.
Refuah shlema.
Bye-bye.
Jay,
Yeah, all good.
be
Thank you.
good.
Jerry.
Rosh Hashanah.